The dust hadn't settled from the gunshot before Olivia Davenport realized her entire world had just shattered into 1,000 pieces. Her father lay motionless on the porch of their ranch house, blood pooling beneath his chest, while 3 men on horseback rode away toward the western ridge, their laughter echoing across the parched Colorado landscape like the caw of vultures circling carrion. It was August 1878, and the fight over water rights in Anima's Forks had finally turned deadly. Olivia dropped to her knees beside her father, pressing her hands against the wound even though she could see the light already fading from his eyes. "Pa, hold on. Please hold on," she begged, her voice breaking as tears streamed down her dust-covered cheeks. But Thomas Davenport had already drawn his last breath, his work-worn hand going slack in hers. She sat there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, cradling her father's head in her lap while the August sun beat down mercilessly on them both. The sound of hoofbeats approaching made her look up sharply, fear and rage warring in her chest. But it wasn't the men who had killed her father returning to finish the job. It was their neighbor from the adjacent property, the man her father had been feuding with for the past 6 months over water, rights to the stream that ran between their lands. Ryland Parker pulled his horse to a stop and dismounted quickly, his dark eyes taking in the scene with what looked like genuine shock. "What happened?" he asked, moving toward them with urgent steps. He was a tall man, probably 26 or 27, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that fell across his forehead. His clothes were dusty from a day's work, and his hands bore the calluses of a rancher who did his own labor. "As if you don't know," Olivia spat, her grief instantly transforming into fury. "Your men just murdered my father in cold blood. They shot him down like a dog on his own porch." Ryland's face paled beneath his tan. "My men? I don't know what you're talking about." "I've been up on the north pasture all day repairing fences. I just rode back and saw you from the ridge." "Don't lie to me," Olivia said, her voice shaking with emotion. "They were riding from this direction. They had to be yours. You've been trying to steal our water rights for months. You've threatened us, intimidated us, and now this." "Miss Davenport, I swear to you on everything I hold sacred I had nothing to do with this," Ryland said, his voice intense. "Your father and I had our disagreements, yes, but I would never resort to murder. I'm not that kind of man." Olivia wanted to believe him. Something in his eyes seemed sincere, almost pleading. But her father lay dead in her arms and someone had to be responsible. "Then who were they?" she demanded. "Who else would want him dead?" "I don't know, but we need to get the marshal out here," Ryland said. He moved closer, reaching down as if to help her up. "Let me help you get him inside. This isn't right, leaving him out in the sun like this." For a moment, Olivia hesitated. Then, realizing she had no choice and no strength left to move her father's body alone, she nodded stiffly. Together, they carefully lifted Thomas Davenport and carried him into the modest ranch house. They laid him on his bed, and Olivia pulled a clean sheet over him, her hands trembling as she smoothed it down. "I'll ride into town and fetch Marshal Brennan," Ryland offered quietly. "You shouldn't be alone right now. Do you have any family nearby? Anyone who can come stay with you?" "My aunt lives in Silverton, but that's a day's ride," Olivia said, her voice hollow. "I'll be fine on my own. I've been running this ranch alongside my father since I was 16. I'm 22 now. I can manage." "That's not what I meant," Ryland said gently. "I meant for comfort, for support during this time." Olivia turned away from him, unable to bear the compassion in his voice. It made her want to crumble, and she couldn't afford that luxury. Not now. "Just get the marshal," she said, "and then stay away from my property. As far as I'm concerned, you're still the most likely person behind this, no matter what you say." She heard him sigh heavily behind her, but he didn't argue. His boots echoed on the wooden floor as he walked out, and moments later, she heard his horse galloping away toward town. Only then did Olivia allow herself to collapse into a chair, burying her face in her hands as great, racking sobs tore through her body. The next few days passed in a blur of grief and anger. Marshal Brennan came out to investigate, but with no witnesses and no clear evidence, there was little he could do. The three men Olivia had seen were described as drifters, possibly hired guns, but no one in town recognized them from her description. Her father's body was prepared for burial by the town's undertaker, and the funeral was held 3 days after his death. Nearly everyone from Anima's Forks and the surrounding ranches attended. The small cemetery on the hill overlooking the valley was crowded with neighbors and friends, all offering their condolences and support. Olivia stood beside the grave in her best black dress, her face pale but composed, accepting their words with quiet dignity. She noticed Ryland Parker standing at the back of the crowd, hat in hand, his expression somber. He didn't approach her, but she felt his eyes on her throughout the service. After the last shovel of dirt had been placed on her father's grave and the crowd began to disperse, Olivia remained behind. She needed time alone with her thoughts, time to process the enormity of what had happened. Her father had been her whole world, the only family she had close by. Now she was alone, responsible for a ranch that was barely hanging on and embroiled in a legal battle over water rights that she barely understood. "Miss Davenport," a voice said behind her, making her turn. It was old Henry Marsh, her father's lawyer. He was a portly man in his 60s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Your father was a good man." "Thank you, Mr. Marsh," Olivia said quietly. "I need to speak with you about your father's estate," he continued. "There are some matters we need to discuss, particularly regarding the ranch and the ongoing dispute over the water rights." "Can it wait?" Olivia asked wearily. "I'm not sure I can handle business talk right now." "I understand, and normally I would wait. But there's something you need to know. Something urgent," Henry said, his expression troubled. "The Parkers are claiming that your father never had legal rights to the water from Canyon Creek. They're saying that the original deed to your property doesn't include water rights, and that they're going to petition the territorial court to grant them exclusive access." Olivia felt as though she'd been struck. "That's impossible. My father built his entire ranch around access to that water. He bought the property 20 years ago specifically because of the creek." "I know, and I've seen the deed your father had. But Ryland Parker's lawyer has presented documents that seem to contradict it," Henry explained. "Without solid proof of your claim, you could lose everything. The ranch is worthless without water." "So what do I do?" Olivia asked, feeling panic rising in her chest. "We need to find the original deed, the one from when the land was first surveyed and sold." "Your father mentioned once that he had documentation from the original owner, something that clearly established the water rights. Do you know where he might have kept important papers?" Olivia thought for a moment. "He had a safe in his study, and there are boxes of old documents in the attic." "I've never gone through them all." "Then that's where we start," Henry said firmly. "The hearing is scheduled for 2 weeks from now. If we can't present solid evidence by then, the court will likely rule in favor of the Parkers, and you'll lose your water access. I'm sorry to burden you with this so soon after your father's death, but time is not on our side." Olivia nodded, squaring her shoulders. She couldn't fall apart now. Her father had spent his life building this ranch, and she wouldn't let it slip away without a fight. "I'll start searching today," she said. "I'll tear the house apart if I have to." That evening, after the last of the funeral guests had departed, Olivia began her search in earnest. She started with her father's study, a small room at the back of the house where he'd kept his accounts and correspondence. The safe was built into the wall behind a painting of her mother, who had died when Olivia was just a baby. She knew the combination by heart and opened it quickly. Inside were various papers and a small amount of cash. She found the deed to the property, dated 1858, and read through it carefully. It mentioned the land boundaries but was frustratingly vague about water rights. There was a reference to natural resources as existing on said property, but nothing specific about the creek. It wasn't enough. She needed something more explicit, something that couldn't be disputed. Hours passed as she went through every drawer, every file, every scrap of paper in the study. By midnight, her eyes were burning with fatigue, but she'd found nothing useful. Discouraged but not defeated, she made her way up the narrow stairs to the attic. The attic was hot and dusty, filled with the accumulated possessions of 2 decades. There were boxes of her mother's things, old furniture, and stacks upon stacks of papers and ledgers. Olivia lit several lanterns and began the painstaking process of going through each box methodically. Dawn was breaking through the small attic window when she finally found something promising. It was a wooden box tucked away in the far corner beneath a stack of old blankets. Inside were letters and documents from the original owner of the property, a man named Joshua Whitmore. She sat cross-legged on the dusty floor and began reading through them by lantern light. Most of the letters were mundane, discussions of crop yields and livestock prices. But near the bottom of the box, she found a leather portfolio tied with a faded ribbon. Her heart began to beat faster as she untied it and spread the contents on the floor. There were several official-looking documents, including what appeared to be a survey map from 1855, 3 years before her father had purchased the property. The map showed the creek clearly marked with the notation "Water rights appurtenant to southern parcel." The southern parcel was the land her father had bought. There was also a letter from the Territorial Surveyor's office confirming that the water rights to Canyon Creek belonged to whoever owned the southern parcel in perpetuity. "This is it," Olivia whispered to herself, her hands shaking as she held the documents. "This proves it." She gathered everything carefully and made her way back downstairs just as the sun was fully rising. She was exhausted, covered in dust, and her black funeral dress was rumpled and dirty, but she felt the first spark of hope she'd experienced since her father's death. She had proof. She had the documents that would save her ranch. But as she laid the papers out on the kitchen table to examine them more carefully in the morning light, she heard the sound of horses approaching. Her first instinct was fear, remembering the men who had killed her father. She grabbed her father's rifle from above the door and moved to the window cautiously. Relief washed over her when she saw it was just one rider, and she recognized Ryland Parker's distinctive black horse. She set the rifle aside but felt her jaw tighten with anger. What did he want now? Hadn't he caused enough trouble? She opened the door before he could knock, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. Ryland looked tired, as though he hadn't slept much either. "I wanted to check on you," he said. "Make sure you were all right." "I know yesterday was difficult." "I'm fine," Olivia said curtly, "and I don't need your concern. Miss Davenport, I know you think I'm responsible for your father's death, but I'm not," Ryland said, his voice patient but strained. "I've been doing my own investigating, asking around town. There's talk that your father had gotten crossways with some men from Durango over a poker game. They might have been the ones who came after him." "That's convenient," Olivia said skeptically. "Blame it on strangers from another town." "I'm not blaming anyone." I'm just telling you what I heard, Ryland replied. Marshal Brennan is looking into it. But that's not why I'm here. I heard Henry Marsh talking in town about the upcoming hearing over the water rights. Miss Davenport, I want you to know that I don't want to take your water. I never did. Olivia stared at him in disbelief. Then why are you challenging my father's claim? I'm not, Ryland said firmly. My stepfather is, Victor Carlyle. He married my mother 5 years ago after my real father died. He's been running the Parker Ranch since then, and he's the one who hired the lawyer and started this whole legal battle. I only found out about it a month ago, and I've been arguing with him about it ever since. This information caught Olivia off guard. She'd known that Ryland's mother had remarried, but she'd assumed Ryland was behind the legal challenge. If you're not behind it, then stop it, she said. Tell your stepfather to drop the suit. I've tried, Ryland said, frustration evident in his voice. But legally, he controls the ranch until I turn 30. That's what my father's will specified. Victor won't listen to me. He's determined to expand our water access, and he doesn't care who he hurts in the process. Then we have nothing to talk about, Olivia said, starting to close the door. Wait, Ryland said, putting his hand on the door. Please, I want to help you. If there's anything I can do to support your case, I will. I'll testify if needed. I'll tell the court that my stepfather is acting without my consent. Olivia studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. All she saw was earnestness and what looked like genuine remorse. Why would you do that? She asked. He's your stepfather. You'd be going against your own family. Because it's the right thing to do, Ryland said simply, and because your father didn't deserve what happened to him. If I can't find his killers, the least I can do is make sure you don't lose your home because of my stepfather's greed. For a long moment, they stood there in the doorway, the morning sun rising higher in the sky behind him. Finally, Olivia stepped back. Come in, she said quietly. I want to show you something. Ryland followed her into the kitchen, removing his hat as he entered. His eyes went immediately to the documents spread across the table. What are these? He asked. Proof, Olivia said, unable to keep the satisfaction from her voice. I found them in the attic last night. They're from the original survey of this land, dated 1855. They clearly state that water rights to Canyon Creek belong to this property in perpetuity. This is what my father was talking about. This is the documentation that proves our claim. Ryland moved closer to the table, his eyes scanning the papers. He picked up the letter from the surveyor's office and read it carefully. When he looked up at her, there was something like relief in his expression. This is exactly what you need, he said. This will settle the matter once and for all. I know, Olivia said. I'm taking them to Henry Marsh today. Good, Ryland said, setting the letter back down carefully. That's good. I'm glad you found them. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Finally, Olivia said, I'm sorry I accused you of being involved in my father's death. I was grieving and angry, and you were the easiest target. You don't need to apologize, Ryland said gently. You just lost your father. Anyone would have reacted the same way. Still, it wasn't fair of me, Olivia insisted. She found herself really looking at him for the first time, seeing him as a person rather than an enemy. There was kindness in his dark eyes and strength in the set of his jaw. He was handsome, she realized with some surprise, though she'd been too angry to notice before. Have you eaten anything? Ryland asked suddenly. You look exhausted. Did you sleep at all last night? I was busy searching for these documents, Olivia admitted. I didn't have time for sleep or food. That's not healthy, Ryland said with concern. You need to take care of yourself. Let me help you. I could make some coffee and breakfast while you get cleaned up. Olivia became suddenly aware of how she must look, covered in attic dust and wearing her rumpled funeral dress. "I can take care of myself," she said automatically, but even as she spoke, she felt her legs trembling with fatigue. "I know you can," Ryland said, "but you don't have to. Please let me help. It's the least I can do." Something in his voice, a gentleness mixed with determination, made her relent. "All right," she said. "The coffee is in the tin by the stove. I'll just go change into something cleaner." When she came back downstairs, 20 minutes later, having washed the dust from her face and changed into a simple blue cotton dress, the smell of coffee and frying bacon filled the kitchen. Ryland had found eggs and was scrambling them in a pan while biscuits warmed in the oven. He looked surprisingly at home in her kitchen, moving with the easy competence of someone accustomed to cooking for himself. "You didn't have to do all this," Olivia said, though her stomach growled at the sight and smell of the food. "I wanted to," Ryland said, glancing over his shoulder with a slight smile. "Besides, I haven't eaten yet either. Sit down. It's almost ready." They ate in companionable silence, both too hungry and tired for conversation. The food was simple but good, and Olivia felt her strength returning with each bite. When they'd finished, Ryland poured them both more coffee and sat back in his chair. "What will you do after the hearing?" he asked. "Assuming you win, which I'm sure you will with those documents." "I'll keep running the ranch same as before," Olivia said. "It's all I know, it's all I've ever wanted to do." "It's a lot of work for one person," Ryland observed. "Your father had hired hands helping him, didn't he, too?" Olivia confirmed. "But they left right after he died. Said they didn't want to work for a woman and they didn't think the ranch would survive anyway." The memory still stung. "That's their loss," Ryland said firmly. "You're clearly capable. Anyone with eyes can see that, but you will need help, at least during roundup and branding season." "I'll figure something out," Olivia said, though she had no idea what. Money was tight, and hiring new hands would be difficult without her father's reputation behind her. "I could help," Ryland offered. "Once we get this water rights issue settled, there's no reason our ranches can't be good neighbors. We could share resources during busy seasons, help each other out." Olivia wanted to accept immediately, but caution held her back. "What about your stepfather? Won't he object?" Ryland's expression hardened. "Victor doesn't control who I help in my free time, and once I turn 30 next year I'll have full control of the Parker Ranch. Until then, I'll do what I can." "Why are you being so kind to me?" Olivia asked suddenly. "We barely know each other." "We were enemies just a few days ago." Ryland was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "We were never enemies," he said finally. "That was between your father and my stepfather, and as for why I'm helping you, maybe it's because I know what it's like to lose a parent. My father died suddenly too, and it turned my whole world upside down. If someone had offered me help during that time, I would have been grateful, so I'm offering it to you now." There was such sincerity in his voice that Olivia felt tears prickling at her eyes. She blinked them back, unwilling to cry in front of him. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means more than you know." They sat together in the kitchen as the morning sun streamed through the windows, drinking coffee and talking. Ryland told her about his father, who had built the Parker Ranch from nothing and had been a fair and honorable man. He spoke with obvious love and respect, and also with frustration about how his stepfather had changed things since taking control. In turn, Olivia found herself opening up about her own father, sharing memories she hadn't spoken aloud in years. She told Ryland about how her father had taught her to ride before she could read, how he'd trusted her with real responsibility on the ranch from a young age, treating her as an equal rather than a child to be sheltered. "He sounds like he was a remarkable man," Ryland said when she'd finished. You must miss him terribly. Every moment, Olivia admitted. The house feels so empty without him. Sometimes I forget he's gone and I start to call out to him about something, and then I remember. Her voice caught, and she looked away. Ryland reached across the table and gently took her hand. The touch was warm and comforting, not presumptuous. "It gets easier," he said softly. "It never stops hurting completely, but it gets easier to carry. I promise." Olivia looked down at their joined hands, feeling something shift inside her chest. When she looked up and met Ryland's eyes, she saw understanding there and something else, something that made her heart beat a little faster. She pulled her hand back carefully, suddenly feeling like she was standing on the edge of something both frightening and exhilarating. "I should get these documents to Mr. Marsh," she said, gathering the papers with hands that trembled slightly. "The sooner he can prepare our case, the better." "I'll ride with you into town," Ryland offered. "Those documents are too important to risk losing." Olivia wanted to argue that she could manage alone, but the truth was that having company sounded appealing. The ride into Anima's Forks would take about 40 minutes, and she found that she wasn't ready to say goodbye to Ryland just yet. "All right," she agreed. "Just let me saddle my horse." They rode side by side along the dirt road that wound down from the high valley, where the ranches were located, into the small mining town of Anima's Forks. The town had sprung up in the early 1870s when silver and gold were discovered in the San Juan Mountains, and though it was small, it was bustling with activity. Miners, prospectors, and ranchers mingled in the streets, and the sound of hammering from the stamp mills echoed off the surrounding peaks. Henry Marsh's office was above the general store on the main street. They tied their horses to the hitching post and climbed the narrow stairs. The lawyer's face lit up when he saw the documents Olivia carried. "Miss Davenport, this is extraordinary," he said, spreading the papers across his desk and examining them with growing excitement. "This is exactly what we needed. The original survey documents, signed by the territorial surveyor himself. This is irrefutable proof that the water rights belong to your property." "So we'll win the case?" Olivia asked, hardly daring to hope. "I'd stake my reputation on it," Henry said firmly. "With this evidence, there's no way the court can rule against you. The Parkers will have to drop their claim." Olivia felt relief wash over her so intensely that she swayed slightly. Ryland's hand came to rest on her lower back, steadying her. "Thank you, Mr. Marsh," she managed to say. "Thank you so much." "Don't thank me. You're the one who found the documents," Henry said with a smile. "I'm just going to present them. Now the hearing is scheduled for next Tuesday at the courthouse in Silverton. Can you be there?" "I'll be there," Olivia confirmed. As they left the lawyer's office and walked back down to the street, Olivia felt lighter than she had in weeks. The threat to her ranch was essentially over. She would keep her water rights and with them her home and livelihood. "Congratulations," Ryland said warmly. "You saved your ranch." "We're not done yet," Olivia cautioned. "The hearing still has to happen." "It's just a formality now," Ryland assured her. "Henry Marsh is right. With those documents, you can't lose." They were walking past the saloon when the doors swung open and a man stumbled out, clearly drunk despite the early hour. He collided with Olivia, nearly knocking her down. Ryland caught her arm, pulling her away from the drunk man. "Watch where you're going," the drunk slurred, squinting at them. Then his eyes focused on Ryland and his expression changed to something ugly. "Well, if it isn't the high and mighty Parker boy, come to gloat, have you?" "I don't know you," Ryland said coldly. "Let us pass." "Oh, you know me," the man said, stepping closer. "I used to work for your stepfather until he fired me last month, said I wasn't pulling my weight. Me. I worked harder than any 3 men on that ranch and he threw me out like trash." That's between you and Victor Carlyle, Ryland said. Now step aside. The drunk man's gaze shifted to Olivia and his eyes narrowed. You're that Davenport girl, aren't you? The one whose father got himself shot. That's a shame, that is. Real shame. Something in his tone made Olivia's blood run cold. What do you know about my father? She demanded. Me? Nothing, the man said, but his smirk suggested otherwise. I just hear things, is all. I heard he was making trouble, asking too many questions about who really owns what around here. Heard he was planning to take his case all the way to the territorial governor if he had to. Who did you hear that from? Olivia pressed. The drunk man's eyes went sly. Can't remember. The whiskey makes me forget things, though sometimes a little money helps jog my memory. Ryland stepped forward, his expression dangerous. If you know something about Thomas Davenport's murder, you need to tell the marshal, not try to extort his daughter. I don't know nothing about no murder, the man said quickly, backing up. I was just making conversation is all. No need to get hostile. Before Ryland could respond, Marshal Brennan appeared from across the street, drawn by the commotion. Is there a problem here? He asked, his hand resting on his gun belt. This man implied he knows something about my father's death, Olivia said immediately. He was talking about my father making trouble and asking questions. Marshal Brennan turned his attention to the drunk man, who suddenly looked much more sober. That true, Cole? You know something about Thomas Davenport's murder? No, sir, Cole said quickly. I was just drunk talking. I don't know nothing. Come with me to my office anyway, the marshal said, taking him by the arm. We're going to have a conversation, you and I. Miss Davenport, Mr. Parker, I'll let you know if I learn anything useful. They watched as the marshal led the drunk man away. Olivia's heart was pounding. Do you think he really knows something? She asked Ryland. Maybe, Ryland said thoughtfully. Or maybe he was just trying to con money out of you, but it's worth investigating. If your father was planning to take the water rights issue to the territorial governor, that might have made him a target. But who would have cared that much? Olivia wondered. It's just a ranch dispute. Water is life out here, Ryland reminded her. People have killed for less. Come on, let's get you home. You've had enough excitement for one day. The ride back to the ranch was quieter, both of them lost in thought. When they reached Olivia's property, Ryland helped her unsaddle her horse and made sure she was settled before preparing to leave. Thank you for everything today, Olivia said as they stood by his horse. For breakfast, for riding with me to town, for standing up to that drunk man. I couldn't have managed it all alone. Yes, you could have, Ryland said with certainty, but I'm glad I could be here anyway. He paused, then added, Would it be all right if I came by tomorrow, just to check on you? Olivia found herself smiling. I'd like that, she admitted. True to his word, Ryland returned the next day and the day after that. Each visit was brief at first, just him stopping by to see if she needed anything or if there was news from the marshal. But gradually, the visits grew longer. He would help her with chores around the ranch, repairing a broken fence post or helping move hay. They would talk while they worked, sharing stories and learning about each other. Olivia discovered that Ryland had a dry sense of humor that could make her laugh even when she was tired and frustrated. He was patient with the animals, firm but gentle, and he worked with a steady determination that she admired. He spoke of his dreams for the Parker Ranch, how he wanted to improve the breeding stock and try some new ranching techniques he'd read about in agricultural journals. For his part, Ryland seemed fascinated by Olivia's knowledge of the land and animals. She'd been raised with ranching in her blood, and she understood the rhythms of the seasons and the needs of the livestock in a way that couldn't be taught, only learned through years of experience. He asked her opinion on various matters, genuinely interested in her thoughts, and he listened when she spoke rather than dismissing her ideas because she was a woman. A week before the scheduled hearing, Marshal Brennan rode out to Olivia's ranch with news. Ryland happened to be there, helping her repair the barn door, and they both stopped working when they saw the lawman approaching. "Miss Davenport, I wanted to update you on the investigation," Marshal Brennan said, dismounting. "That man Cole you encountered in town, he finally talked. Turns out he did know something about your father's death." Olivia's breath caught. "What did he say?" "He said that about 2 weeks before your father died, 3 men came through town asking questions about him. They wanted to know about his ranch, his finances, whether he owed anyone money. Cole overheard them talking in the saloon about how they'd been hired to convince your father to drop his claim to the water rights." "Hired by who?" Ryland demanded. He didn't know for certain, but he heard one of them mention payment from someone in Denver. "Someone with business interests in this area who wanted to buy up properties cheap," Marshal Brennan explained. "I've sent telegrams to the marshal's office in Denver, but it might take some time to track down who was behind it." "But what about my stepfather?" Ryland asked. "Did Victor Carlyle have anything to do with it?" Marshal Brennan shook his head. "From what I can determine, no. Mr. Carlyle has been aggressive with his legal challenge, but there's no evidence he was involved with hiring those men. This seems to be bigger than just a dispute between 2 ranches." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. "You're saying someone in Denver wanted my father dead so they could buy our ranch?" "It's a theory," the marshal said carefully. "Water rights are valuable, especially as more people move into the territory. Someone might have thought they could buy your ranch cheap from a grieving daughter who couldn't prove her water claim. They didn't count on you being as tough and smart as you are." After the marshal left, Olivia sank down on the porch steps, trying to process this information. Ryland sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "This doesn't change anything for you," he said quietly. "You still have your proof, and you're still going to win that hearing. Whoever was behind this, their plan failed." "My father is still dead," Olivia said, her voice breaking. "Even if they catch the men who killed him, even if they hang them, it won't bring him back." "No," Ryland agreed softly, "but justice still matters. And you keeping this ranch, making it thrive, that would be the best way to honor his memory." Olivia turned to look at him, at this man who had somehow become so important to her in such a short time. "Why do you care so much?" she asked. "About me, about my ranch?" Ryland was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. "At first, I just wanted to do the right thing," he said. "To make up for my stepfather's actions and help someone who'd been wronged. But now—" He reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Now it's because I care about you, Olivia, more than I probably should, considering we barely know each other." Olivia's heart was racing. She should pull away, should maintain some distance. It was too soon after her father's death, too complicated with the legal battle still ongoing. But she found herself leaning into his touch instead, her eyes closing briefly at the warmth of his hand against her skin. "I care about you too," she whispered. "It scares me how much." "Why does it scare you?" Ryland asked, his thumb stroking gently across her cheekbone. "Because I've already lost so much," Olivia said, opening her eyes to meet his. "I don't think I could bear to lose you too." "You're not going to lose me," Ryland said with quiet intensity. "I'm not going anywhere." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Olivia didn't want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted to feel something other than grief and anger and fear. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, a promise rather than a demand. She kissed him back, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart beating as rapidly as her own, When they finally broke apart, both breathing a little faster, Ryland rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for days," he admitted. "So have I," Olivia confessed. "Even though I kept telling myself it was too soon, that it was foolish." "Maybe it is too soon," Ryland said. "Maybe we're being foolish, but I don't care. Life is too short and too uncertain out here to waste time pretending we don't feel what we feel." Olivia couldn't argue with that. The past weeks had taught her how quickly everything could change, how fragile life really was. If she'd learned anything from her father's death, it was that you had to seize happiness when you found it, because there were no guarantees of tomorrow. They sat on the porch steps together as the sun began to set, painting the Colorado sky in shades of orange and pink. Ryland's arm was around her shoulders, and Olivia leaned into his solid warmth, feeling safer than she had in weeks. "What happens after the hearing?" she asked eventually. "What happens with us? Whatever you want to happen," Ryland said. "I'm not going to pressure you or rush you, but I hope you'll give us a chance, give me a chance to court you properly." "Your stepfather isn't going to be happy about you courting a Davenport," Olivia pointed out. "Victor Carlyle doesn't get a say in who I court or care about," Ryland said firmly. "In less than a year, I'll have full control of the ranch and his opinion won't matter anymore. But even before then, this is my choice to make. It might cause problems for you," Olivia warned. "You're worth it," Ryland said simply, and the conviction in his voice made her believe him. The day of the hearing arrived. Olivia dressed carefully in her best outfit, a deep green dress that had been her mother's. Henry Marsh had sent a message the day before, confirming that everything was ready and that the documents she'd found would be presented to the judge. Ryland arrived early to ride with her to Silverton. The journey would take most of the morning and the hearing was scheduled for 2 o'clock that afternoon. As they rode, Olivia found her nervousness growing. "What if something goes wrong?" she asked. "What if they challenge the authenticity of the documents?" "They can't," Ryland assured her. "Henry said they've been verified by the Territorial Surveyor's office. They're legitimate, and they prove your claim beyond any doubt." Silverton was bigger than Anima's Forks, a bustling mining town set in a valley surrounded by steep mountain peaks. The courthouse was a substantial brick building on the main street, a symbol of law and order in the wild territory. Olivia and Ryland met Henry Marsh on the steps. "Are you ready?" the lawyer asked Olivia. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied. Inside, the courtroom was already filling with people. Olivia was surprised to see how many townspeople from Anima's Forks had made the journey to attend. Many of them had known her father and wanted to show their support. She saw a few of the miners who had worked claims near their ranch, and several of the shopkeepers from town. On the other side of the courtroom, she saw Victor Carlyle for the first time. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s with graying hair and cold blue eyes. His lawyer sat beside him, a thin man with a pinched face who was shuffling through papers. When Victor's eyes landed on Ryland sitting next to Olivia, his face darkened with anger. The judge entered, and everyone rose. Judge Samuel Henderson was known throughout the territory as a fair but stern man who didn't tolerate nonsense in his courtroom. He called the proceedings to order and asked the lawyers to present their cases. Victor Carlyle's lawyer went first, arguing that the original deed to the Davenport property was vague about water rights, and that therefore the water from Canyon Creek should be considered shared between the two properties, with the Parkers having priority due to their larger operation. Then it was Henry Marsh's turn. He stood and addressed the court with confidence. "Your Honor, I have documents that definitively settle this matter." He presented the survey documents and the letter from the Territorial Surveyor's office, explaining where they had been found and how they had been verified as authentic. The judge examined the documents carefully, his expression unreadable. The courtroom was silent except for the rustle of paper and the ticking of the wall clock. Finally, Judge Henderson looked up. "These documents are clear and explicit," he said. "The water rights to Canyon Creek are appurtenant to the southern parcel, which is now owned by Miss Olivia Davenport. The claim brought by Mr. Victor Carlyle is without merit and is hereby dismissed." Relief flooded through Olivia so powerfully that she felt dizzy. Henry Marsh was shaking her hand, congratulating her. Around the courtroom, people were applauding and calling out their support. She looked at Ryland, who was smiling broadly, pride evident in his eyes. Victor Carlyle stood abruptly, his face red with anger. "This is outrageous," he shouted. "That property should be ours. We've been working that land longer than the Davenports." "Mr. Carlyle, control yourself or I'll have you removed from my courtroom," Judge Henderson said sharply. "The law is clear and the decision is final. The water rights belong to Miss Davenport." Victor stormed out of the courtroom, his lawyer hurrying after him, but Olivia barely noticed. She was too busy being congratulated by the townspeople who had come to support her, too busy feeling the weight of fear and uncertainty lift from her shoulders. Outside on the courthouse steps, Ryland pulled her into a quick embrace, mindful of the crowd around them. "You did it," he said. "Your ranch is safe." "We did it," Olivia corrected. "I couldn't have gotten through this without you." They celebrated that evening at Silverton's Best Restaurant, along with Henry Marsh and several of the supporters from Anima's Forks. It was the first time Olivia had felt like celebrating anything since her father's death, and while there was still sadness in her heart, there was also hope. As they rode back to Anima's Forks in the late evening, under a sky full of stars, Ryland reached over and took Olivia's hand. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. "What is it?" Olivia asked, hearing the seriousness in his tone. "I had a confrontation with Victor after the hearing," Ryland admitted. "He told me that if I continue seeing you, he'll cut me off from the ranch entirely. He said he'll find a way to keep control even after I turn 30. Olivia's stomach sank. "Ryland, you can't lose your ranch because of me." "I'm not going to lose it," Ryland said firmly. "He's bluffing. My father's will is ironclad. On my 30th birthday, control of the Parker Ranch transfers to me, and there's nothing Victor can do about it. But even if he could somehow prevent that, it wouldn't change my mind about you." "But your ranch is your whole life," Olivia protested. "No," Ryland said, stopping his horse and turning to face her. "It's a big part of my life, but it's not my whole life. You know what I realized today sitting in that courtroom? I realized that I'd rather have you and no ranch than have the ranch and know you. I'm in love with you, Olivia. I know it's fast. I know we haven't known each other long, but it's true." Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I started falling for you that first day when you came to help me with my father's body, even though I'd accused you of terrible things." Ryland dismounted and helped her down from her horse. Standing there in the starlight, he cupped her face in his hands. "I want to marry you," he said. "I know we should wait longer, should observe proper mourning customs, but I don't want to wait. I want to wake up every morning with you beside me. I want to build a life with you." "Yes," Olivia said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and Olivia kissed him back with all the love and hope and joy that was welling up inside her. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Ryland pressed his forehead against hers. "We'll combine the ranches," he said. "Once Victor no longer has control, we'll tear down the boundary fences and make it one operation. With our water rights secured and our properties combined, we'll have one of the biggest and most successful ranches in the territory." "That sounds perfect," Olivia said, but then a thought occurred to her. "What about Victor and your mother? Where will they go?" "My mother has family in Denver," Ryland said, "and Victor has enough money to start over somewhere else. It's not my problem anymore. They made their choices, and I'm making mine." They decided to wait until November to marry, giving Olivia 3 months of official mourning for her father. It wasn't the full year that custom dictated, but it seemed like a reasonable compromise. During those months, Ryland spent nearly every day at Olivia's ranch, helping her prepare for winter and making plans for their future. The tension between Ryland and his stepfather grew increasingly hostile. Victor tried everything he could to prevent Ryland from seeing Olivia, from threats to attempted bribes to pleading. But Ryland was immovable in his decision. He loved Olivia, and nothing his stepfather said or did would change that. In October, Marshal Brennan brought more news. The investigation into Thomas Davenport's murder had finally borne fruit. The Denver marshal had tracked down the 3 men who had been seen in Anima's Forks around the time of the murder. Under questioning, one of them had admitted to the killing and had named the man who hired them. A wealthy businessman from Denver named Carlton Hughes, who had been buying up properties throughout the San Juan Mountains, planning to consolidate them into a massive ranching operation. "Hughes is in custody," Marshal Brennan told Olivia. "He'll be tried for conspiracy to commit murder. The man who actually pulled the trigger has already been convicted and sentenced to hang. The other 2 are going to prison for long terms." Olivia listened to this news with mixed feelings. She was glad that justice was being served, that her father's killers would pay for their crime. But it didn't bring her father back. It didn't fill the empty space he'd left in her life. "Are you all right?" Ryland asked after the marshal had left. They were sitting on her porch, watching the autumn sun set over the mountains. "I'm sad," Olivia admitted. "I'm glad they caught the men who killed Pa, but it doesn't make the grief go away. I still miss him every day." "You always will," Ryland said gently, taking her hand. "But the grief will get easier to carry, and you'll have good memories to balance it. Your father was proud of you, Olivia. I can tell just from the way you talk about him. He raised you to be strong and capable and independent. That's a gift that no one can take away." "I wish he could be here for the wedding," Olivia said quietly. "I wish he could walk me down the aisle." "He'll be there," Ryland assured her. "Maybe not physically, but in spirit, he'll be there." The wedding took place on a crisp November morning in the small church in Anima's Forks. It was a simple ceremony, but beautiful. Olivia wore her mother's wedding dress, which she'd found carefully preserved in the attic, and carried a bouquet of the last autumn wildflowers. Henry Marsh gave her away, standing in for the father who couldn't be there. Ryland stood at the altar in his best suit, his eyes never leaving Olivia as she walked down the aisle. When she reached him and took his hands, he whispered, "You're beautiful." The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They exchanged vows promising to love and honor each other, to support each other through whatever challenges life brought. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ryland kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. The townspeople had organized a celebration at the community hall. There was food and music and dancing. Even Victor Carlyle made a brief, grudging appearance, though he left quickly without speaking to either Ryland or Olivia. Ryland's mother stayed longer, and before she left, she pulled Olivia aside. "I'm sorry for everything Victor put you and your father through," she said quietly. "I didn't know how bad it had gotten until it was too late. I hope you and Ryland will be very happy together." "Thank you," Olivia said, moved by the older woman's sincerity. "That means a lot." Ryland and Olivia spent their wedding night at the ranch house that had been Olivia's childhood home and would now be their shared home. They made love for the first time with a sweetness and passion that left them both breathless and laughing, wrapped in each other's arms as the November wind howled outside. "I love you, Mrs. Parker," Ryland whispered against her hair as they lay together afterward. "I love you too," Olivia replied, her hand resting over his heart, feeling it beat strong and steady beneath her palm. When Ryland turned 30 in February of 1879, control of the Parker Ranch officially transferred to him, just as his father's will had stipulated. Victor and Ryland's mother moved to Denver shortly after, and Ryland began the process of combining the two properties into one large ranch, just as he'd planned. The first year of their marriage was busy and challenging. They worked from dawn to dusk, improving the property, increasing their herds, and establishing their reputation as fair and honest ranchers. Olivia proved to be an invaluable partner. Her knowledge of the land and animals, combined with Ryland's business acumen and innovative ideas, made them a formidable team. By the spring of 1880, the ranch was thriving. They had hired several reliable hands, expanded their grazing lands, and were turning a healthy profit. They had also become pillars of the community in Animas Forks, known for their generosity and willingness to help neighbors in need. In June of that year, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. She told Ryland one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, something that had become their daily ritual. "I have some news," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." Ryland's face went through a series of expressions: shock, joy, wonder, all in the space of a few seconds. "A baby," he repeated. "We're having a baby." "Yes," Olivia confirmed, laughing at his astonished expression. "In December, if my calculations are correct." Ryland pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I can't believe it," he said. "We're going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Olivia asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it," Ryland said. "I'm thrilled, I'm terrified, I'm grateful. I'm all of those things." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and fall. Ryland became increasingly protective, insisting that Olivia rest more and work less. She protested at first, insisting she was perfectly capable of doing her normal chores. But as her belly grew, she had to admit that slowing down was probably wise. On a snowy December evening, with the midwife from town in attendance and Ryland pacing nervously outside the bedroom door, Olivia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas, after Olivia's father, with the middle name of James after Ryland's father. When Ryland was finally allowed into the bedroom and saw his wife holding their son, he felt tears streaming down his face. "He's perfect," he whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "He is," Olivia agreed, looking up at her husband with exhaustion and joy in her eyes. "He's absolutely perfect." Little Thomas grew into a sturdy, happy child. He had his mother's blue eyes and his father's dark hair, and he was doted on by everyone on the ranch. Ryland proved to be a devoted father, patient and loving, teaching his son about the ranch and the land even when he was still too young to truly understand. 2 years after Thomas was born, Olivia gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, after Ryland's grandmother. And 3 years after that, another son they called William. Their family grew, and so did the ranch. The Parkers became one of the most successful ranching families in the San Juan Mountains, known far and wide for the quality of their cattle and horses. But more than their success, they were known for their love for each other. Even after years of marriage, Ryland and Olivia could often be seen stealing kisses in the barn or holding hands as they walked the property. Their children grew up surrounded by affection and security, knowing without doubt that they were loved. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Ryland and Olivia took a rare day off from ranch work and rode up to the ridge overlooking both properties. It was the same spot where they could see the creek that had caused so much trouble all those years ago, the water rights that had nearly cost Olivia everything. "You ever think about how we met?" Olivia asked, leaning back against her husband's chest as they sat looking out over their land. "How we started as enemies." "We were never really enemies," Ryland said, his arms tightening around her. "We just didn't know yet that we were meant to be together." "You saved me, you know," Olivia said quietly. "After Pa died, I was so lost, I didn't know if I could keep going. But you gave me hope. You gave me a reason to keep fighting." "You saved yourself," Ryland corrected gently. "You were the one who searched all night and found those documents. You were the one who had the strength to keep going even when everything seemed impossible. I just had the privilege of standing beside you." "We saved each other then," Olivia said, turning in his arms to kiss him. "And we built something beautiful together." "That we did," Ryland agreed, looking out at the sprawling ranch below them, at the home they'd built together, the children they were raising, the life they'd created. "That we did." As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Ryland and Olivia sat together on the ridge, grateful for the journey that had brought them together, for the love that had sustained them through challenges and triumphs alike. The fight over water rights that had once threatened to destroy them had instead brought them together, and the document Olivia had found in that dusty attic had not only saved her ranch, but had given them the foundation to build a life together. Their story had started with grief and conflict, with loss and legal battles and uncertainty. But it had become something beautiful, a testament to the power of love and partnership, of two strong people choosing to face life's challenges together rather than alone. As they rode back down to the ranch house where their children were waiting, where a fire was burning in the hearth and dinner was warming on the stove, Olivia looked over at her husband and smiled. They had built more than just a successful ranch. They had built a family, a legacy, a love that would endure for generations to come. The ranch that Thomas Davenport had died defending had not only survived but thrived, passed down through the family as a symbol of resilience and determination. The water from Canyon Creek continued to flow, nourishing the land and the animals, sustaining the life they had built together. And every evening as the sun set over the mountains, Ryland and Olivia would stand on their porch, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest, watching the sky change colors and counting their blessings. They had fought for their rights, for their land, for their future. And they had won not just a legal victory, but something far more precious, a love that had been tested by fire and had emerged stronger than ever. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and cycles. Their children grew tall and strong, learning the ranching life from their parents. Thomas, their eldest, developed his grandfather's love for the land and his father's head for business. Rose inherited her mother's determination and her father's gentle heart. William, the youngest, was curious and adventurous, always exploring the far corners of the ranch and coming home with stories of what he'd discovered. On Thomas Davenport's birthday each year, the family would ride out to the small cemetery on the hill where he was buried. They would tend his grave, pulling weeds and placing fresh flowers, and Olivia would tell her children stories about the grandfather they'd never known. She told them how he'd taught her to rope and ride, how he'd trusted her with real responsibility even when she was young, how he'd fought to protect their water rights and their home. "Your grandfather would have been so proud of all of you," she would tell them, her voice thick with emotion. He would have loved seeing what we've built here, how the ranch has grown. Ryland would put his arm around her shoulders during these visits, lending his strength and support. He knew the grief never fully went away, even after all these years. But he also knew that Olivia had made peace with her loss, had honored her father's memory by living fully and well. By the time their children were teenagers, the Parker Ranch was known throughout Colorado and beyond. They ran thousands of head of cattle across their combined properties, and their horses were sought after by ranchers as far away as Texas and Montana. Ryland had introduced innovative breeding techniques that improved the quality of their stock, and Olivia's knowledge of the land ensured they managed their resources sustainably, never overgrazing or depleting the water sources. The town of Animas Forks had changed over the years, too. The silver mines that had driven its initial growth were starting to play out, and some of the population had moved on to seek opportunities elsewhere. But the town remained a vibrant community, and the Parkers were among its most prominent and respected families. When young Thomas turned 18 in 1899, Ryland and Olivia began gradually transitioning control of the ranch to their son, just as Ryland's father had planned for him. They taught him everything they knew about managing the property, about dealing with hands and buyers and bankers, about reading the weather and the land and the animals. "This ranch is your heritage," Ryland told his son one evening as they worked together in the barn. "Your grandmother and I built it together, but we built it for you and your siblings, for the generations that will come after us. Take care of it, and it will take care of you." "I will, Pa," Thomas promised. "I've watched you and Mom my whole life. I've seen how hard you work, how much you care about this place and the people who depend on it. I want to make you proud." "You already do," Ryland assured him, clasping his son's shoulder. "Every single day." As the new century approached, Ryland and Olivia found themselves with more time to simply enjoy each other's company. They still worked on the ranch, but the day-to-day operations were increasingly handled by Thomas and the experienced hands they'd trained over the years. They took long rides together, revisiting favorite spots from their early days together, reminiscing about their courtship and the challenges they'd overcome. "Do you ever regret it?" Olivia asked one day as they sat by Canyon Creek, the water that had caused so much trouble all those years ago flowing peacefully past them. "Choosing me over your stepfather, potentially risking your inheritance." "Not for a single second," Ryland said emphatically. "You were the best choice I ever made. You are the best choice I ever made. Everything good in my life comes from you." "That's not true," Olivia protested. "You built this ranch with your own hands and mind." "I built it with you by my side," Ryland corrected. "I could never have done any of this without you. You're my partner in every sense of the word. We've made every important decision together. We've faced every challenge together. That's why we've succeeded." Olivia leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face and the solid strength of her husband beside her. "I love you," she said simply. "After all these years, I love you more than ever." "And I love you," Ryland replied, kissing the top of her head. "Forever and always." Their daughter Rose married a young veterinarian from Durango in 1901, a kind man who shared her love of animals. They settled on a portion of the Parker Ranch that Ryland and Olivia deeded to them as a wedding present, building their own home and starting their own family. William, their youngest, developed a passion for law and went east to attend university, though he promised to return to Colorado once he'd completed his education. Young Thomas married a school teacher named Emma in 1903, and they moved into the original ranch house where Olivia had grown up. Ryland and Olivia built a smaller house for themselves nearby, a cozy home perfect for two people entering the later stages of their lives. "It feels right," Olivia said as they moved their belongings into the new house. "Thomas and Emma should have the main house. They'll be running the ranch soon. They need the space for the family they'll raise there." "And we don't need much space," Ryland agreed. "Just room for the two of us and the occasional visit from grandchildren." Those grandchildren started arriving soon after. Thomas and Emma had a daughter in 1904, whom they named Olivia after her grandmother. Rose and her husband had twin boys in 1905. The Parker Ranch rang with the laughter of children once again, and Ryland and Olivia delighted in their roles as grandparents. "Your grandfather Thomas would have loved this," Olivia told little Olivia one day as the 4-year-old sat on her lap on the porch. "He would have loved seeing all these children running around, carrying on the family tradition." "Tell me about him, Grandma," the little girl requested, as she often did. So Olivia told the story once again, about a brave man who had stood up for what was right, who had fought to protect his land and his water rights, who had raised his daughter to be strong and independent. She told it with love and pride, keeping Thomas Davenport's memory alive for yet another generation. As Ryland and Olivia grew older, moving into their 50s and then their 60s, they watched with satisfaction as their children and grandchildren flourished. The ranch continued to prosper under young Thomas's management. He had inherited his father's intelligence and his mother's instincts, and he ran the operation with skill and wisdom. The small house Ryland and Olivia had built became a gathering place for the family. Sunday dinners often found all three of their children and their families crowded around the table, with Ryland at one end and Olivia at the other, surrounded by the people they loved most in the world. "We're blessed," Ryland would say during those dinners, looking around at the faces of his children and grandchildren. "Truly blessed." "Yes, we are," Olivia would agree, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1908, their children organized a celebration that brought together friends and neighbors from across the region. It was held at the ranch on a beautiful November day, with tables laden with food and a band playing music for dancing. As Ryland and Olivia danced together under the autumn sky, moving to a slow waltz with the ease of long practice, they were surrounded by the life they'd built together. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and beautiful. Their children and grandchildren watched with love and admiration. Friends from decades of life in Colorado Territory, now the state of Colorado, raised glasses in their honor. "Thank you," Olivia said quietly as they danced, her head resting on Ryland's shoulder. "For what?" Ryland asked, though he was smiling as if he already knew. "For everything," Olivia said. "For standing by me when my father died, for helping me find those documents that saved the ranch, for loving me even when I was angry and grieving and difficult, for building this beautiful life with me." "I should be thanking you," Ryland countered. "You took a chance on me when you had every reason not to trust me. You opened your heart to me even though you were hurting. You've been the best partner, the best friend, the best wife anyone could ask for." "We saved each other," Olivia said, echoing the words from so many years ago on the ridge. "And we built something beautiful together." As the sun set on their anniversary celebration, painting the Colorado sky in shades of gold and crimson, Ryland and Olivia stood together, watching their family and friends enjoying themselves. They had started with so little, just two people drawn together by circumstances and tragedy. But they had built an empire of love, a legacy that would endure for generations. The water from Canyon Creek still flowed through the property, its rights secured by the documents Olivia had found in her father's attic during one desperate night of searching. That water nourished the land, sustained the cattle and horses, provided life to everything they'd built. But it was love that had truly sustained them, love that had given them the strength to overcome every obstacle, to weather every storm. As they grew into their 70s, Ryland and Olivia slowed down even more, spending their days in quiet contentment. They would sit on their porch in rocking chairs, holding hands and watching the world go by. They would take gentle rides around the property, visiting their favorite spots and sharing memories. They would play with their great-grandchildren who were starting to arrive, delighting in the continuation of the family line. "No regrets?" Ryland asked Olivia one evening as they sat watching the sunset, a ritual they'd maintained for decades. "Not a single one," Olivia said with certainty. "You? Only that we can't live it all over again," Ryland said with a smile. "It's been a good life, Olivia, the best life." "It has," she agreed, squeezing his hand. "And it's not over yet. We still have time, still have each other." They did have time, precious years together, as they moved into their 80s. They celebrated their 40th anniversary, then their 45th. They watched their grandchildren grow up and start families of their own. They saw the ranch continue to evolve and adapt to changing times, always remaining prosperous and well-managed. On a warm summer evening in 1919, Ryland Parker passed away peacefully in his sleep, Olivia's hand in his. He was 81 years old, and he had lived to see his family flourish and his legacy secured. His last words to Olivia were, "I love you. Always have, always will." Olivia mourned him deeply, but she took comfort in the knowledge that they'd had 50 wonderful years together, that they'd built something lasting and beautiful. She lived for another 5 years, staying active and involved with the ranch and her family until the end. She passed away in her sleep in the spring of 1924, just 3 months after her 87th birthday. They were buried side by side in the small cemetery on the hill, their graves next to Thomas Davenport's. The headstones were simple but elegant, marking the resting places of two people who had loved deeply and lived fully, who had fought for what they believed in and built a legacy that would endure for generations. The Parker Ranch continued to thrive under the management of their descendants, passed down through the family as a living testament to the love and determination of its founders. The story of how Ryland and Olivia met, how they fought for their water rights and fell in love in the process, became part of family lore, told and retold to each new generation. The documents Olivia had found in her father's attic, the papers that had saved the ranch and proved their claim to the water rights, were carefully preserved and eventually framed. They hung in the main ranch house as a reminder of how crucial it is to fight for what's right, to never give up even when circumstances seem impossible. And every evening, as the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors, the descendants of Ryland Parker and Olivia Davenport would pause in their work and watch, remembering the love story that had started with tragedy and conflict, but had blossomed into something beautiful and enduring. The water from Canyon Creek continued to flow, nourishing the land just as the love between Ryland and Olivia had nourished their family, creating a legacy that would last forever. Their story was proof that even in the hardest times, even when loss and grief seem overwhelming, love can flourish. It can grow and strengthen and sustain, creating something beautiful out of ashes. Ryland and Olivia had found each other in the midst of conflict and sorrow, and they had chosen to build rather than destroy, to love rather than hate, to hope rather than despair. And that choice, that commitment to each other and to the life they built together, had made all the difference. It had created a family, a legacy, a love story that would be remembered and cherished for generations to come. The Parker Ranch stood as a monument to their love, to their determination, to their unwavering belief that together they could overcome anything. The fight over water rights had brought them together. The documents Olivia found had saved the ranch. But it was love, pure and simple and true, that had created the real magic, the real legacy, the real happily ever after.